first of all, thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks Mark and Vasilis, for your time. I think what we're going to talk today is a very trending topic, if I may say so. It's about having the right ecosystem, the platform, and the architecture, around adopting AI at scale. And one of the key challenges which has really hit the industry is around data veracity. I think to begin with, there's this anecdote that I really liked out of our Tech Vision 2018, and it goes like this. It was about 35 years back. There was a gentleman called Stanislav Petrov, and he was from the Soviet Union monitoring system, and he was all of a sudden he got a satellite system alert which kind of suggested that the US has attacked the Soviet Union with a nuclear missile. I mean, by protocol, he would have needed to alert his superiors, and that would have resulted in catastrophe because obviously, there is a counter-retaliation. But something really did not look right in the context of what he was watching, and he chose not to inform his superiors. And at the end of it, they ran an investigation, and it turned out that there was a reflection of the sun in the cloud, which led the satellite system to believe that there was a missile, right? Now, obviously, for what he did, that was, that saved the world, arguably. But the point being that in the context of what he was watching, and he had this experience to really challenge the authenticity of the data and therefore kind of bring out a valuable, insight around what was really going on. Now, when you're talking about Earth data or few data sets, it's still an art. But when you're talking about millions of data, right, which are being churned out in split seconds, I mean, this could be a hugely complex and challenging thing to deal with when it comes to data veracity. And then, on top of that, if you lay the statistic which comes out from IDC, where they said in 2017, 151 billion US dollar of revenue play was there in the market when it came to data sciences and big data. It's massive. Now, where it starts to become a bit, I would say, nervousness kind of creeps in is when you see another statistic which suggests that 97% of business decisions that were made in the industry, the managers of those enterprises do not believe that the data that they were using to drive those decisions, had the level of integrity, right? Now, that brings us to the point, both for Vasilis, yourself, and Mark. In your engagements, obviously you are in the RegTech space. You are providing legal. Your offering is providing legal insights and advisory. What's the typical nervousness that you encounter, and what are the guidance or advice that you provide back to your client in terms of tempering that down so they help scale the solution?
So Cognitiv started in 2015, and it's a critical moment because neural networks, deep learning started in 2013. So neural networks started at that point to accelerate of images. So that has been made by GAFA. Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, right? So it's all about image recognition. So just because those companies, their regulation under these companies is quite small, the focus was not on compliance. The focus was, can you understand how many cuts this image has, pretty much. So and we took this technology, deep learning, to combine it with natural processing, NLP. So having combined these two technologies, you can have a very high accuracy, and a guarantee is better than of accuracy of humans. So comparing with manual review of documents against what deep learning can achieve, there's a huge gap. So now is how can people understand that this is in favor of document analysis? How can people say, yes, I will trust the machine of the answers against what actually the paralegals or document review managers can achieve? It's a great question, but you have to understand the capabilities of the technology and how the technology works and focus on the results rather than focusing on the process.
Right. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, kind of very similar. We're kind of in similar space, right? So just echoing that, it's about can they trust the output? There's no such thing as near compliance in our space, where people have tended to trust humans. It's how do you get them to trust the output from the machine? And therefore, it's how do you make it explainable? How do you give that guarantee, or not a guarantee, but give them the evidence that they can then rely on to then move forward with that adoption? And so, there's many different ways that you can do that. I'm sure we're going to talk our way through it as we go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things that we kind of prescribe is the key here is about getting the confidence behind the data. And there are about, essentially, from our perspective, there are about 3 tenets, as we call it. One is the provenance, the other is the context, and third is the integrity, right? And what we mean by provenance is around, right from the inception of the data to its grave, what has been the traceability around the history of the data, and context is about how do you qualify that a data or a set of data is suitable for a particular scenario. And from a capability standpoint, what we really suggest and recommend is you need to have a practice in the form of data intelligence, which is essentially leveraging your data sciences capability, leveraging your cybersecurity capability, and how you kind of bring that all together. It's not really about building something from the scratch. It's about how you leverage what you already have got, but really bring the accountability to this practice who have the responsibility of grading the data and really have this top-down organizational approach around enforcing the 3 tenets, which is around provenance, context, and the integrity, right? So I think one of the key challenges that obviously the industry is also facing about it. It's essentially not always about somebody somebody trying to tamper with the data. It's also could be a process flow, right? So one of the things, and this is a quick anecdote as well. Today, my wife, she has got carpal tunnel, right? So she went to the doctor and she texts back, and she had a great meeting with the doctor. She was quite happy, and she said, the text goes like this, the outcome was great, and my immediate text back to her was, so is he going to operate you? And her response back was, it was a she, and yes. And I was like, wow, so it is a bias in my head, right? So I associated immediately a doctor to a man, to a he, right? Which is nothing, it's not malicious as such, and therefore it kind of, the point being that it's not always about the data. It's not always about somebody maliciously trying to do something there. It's just that the process that you've got there is not working. And to be honest with you, 10 out of 10 times when we are talking about implementing AI solutions, we are talking about transforming the process. So the process that we're trying to automate is not going to look and live the same as it used to be till about yesterday. So it'll be interesting to know from yourselves as to when you get into your engagements, is there a special treatment or focus that you have at a process level so that the entire data supply chain from there on, as the data gets generated, because you've got this feedback mechanism in place for your continuous learning of the algorithms, you make sure that there's no data veracity aspects that kick in as the life cycle proceeds once you've implemented the solution?
So as I said, we're using neural networks since the beginning of the company. So neural networks are very good on picking up things that normally it actually automates the way of understanding, finding insights. So let me give you an example. You're about to review 1,000 documents, and you want to know what's the critical aspect of one element. And you just want to automate this process. So you're going to provide, let's say, 100 examples. But then the system starts picking up those examples and have a high accuracy on the 1,000 examples you have in front of you. But then when you're going to go and have it, off you go, other people are going to use the system, it has a very small success. The system is never going to explain UI because it's neural networks. It's a very automated process. But then you realize that every time you provide an example, it was an underlined or it was something in bold. And our system can understand the context, the content, the type of the phones, and all that. Takes all the information that a human mind can pick up just to emulate the way that people are working. So if it's underlined each time as this is critical information, the next time you're going to have something that's not underlined, the system going to never pick it up as critical information. So you can see exactly what you said. It doesn't have to be malicious, but it be elements that you never thought about it. So what's the solution? The solution obviously is training. People understand that they have to, when they build the data, the examples for the models, they need to understand that it needs some heavy variability in many ways and many shapes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would just expand, on that, right? It's ensuring. So you've got the three types of bias we've been talking about. Sort of the automatic learn, what's inherent in the data that it's been learning from. You've got ignorance, and that comes from not having enough diversity in your data science pool to be able to get the different views and the opinions to do that. Setting up the correct tests, correct iterations before you then implement. And then the last one obviously being deliberate, where you can then, obviously, the malicious, so then having audits and hot topic regulation. So for me, it's about ensuring that as you're building these models and creating your data sets, that you have the right diversity within your team to ensure that you can manage that out, setting up the correct iterative tests, and to repeat that process.
I think there's an element of also bringing the people in the loop, right? So,
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, the teacher is the human for, till you actually, reach that point of confidence, where you kind of statistically know that you've got enough confidence to kind of leave the algorithm by itself. So it is process in terms of, how the system works, and what the business requirements are, but it's also around how you weave the human element around it, and then bring back to the three tenets as to how you mesh that up so that you've got a continuous control system in place that kind of flows through the life cycle, and therefore the confidence is retained. Right, that makes sense. Yep. Yeah, good. So in the interest of time, it's quite an engaging topic, but I have to shift the gear because the other thing, when it comes to platform and ecosystem, the thing that we need to debate about a bit is around the skills, right? Because we know that today's products are fairly following a democratic architecture, as I call it, and by that what I mean is you've got UI-based environments, you pretty much drag and drop, you're making RESTful API calls, you're consuming services from the cloud or from your on-prem service host. At the end of the day, if you really look at it invasively, you're really not needing the skills or the background that you would imagine is needed to implement a fairly complex solution like AI, right? And which I think is part of the design, because you want to scale, you want to have more and more people, and not everybody is going to be a data scientist or a data engineer, right? But I think the side effect of that is you've got more and more people out there deploying these solutions who really probably do not understand the nuances of data veracity, related challenges, and how it therefore impacts or potentially could impact the business. Now, what would be interesting to understand from yourselves is, in your engagements, are you impacted by a similar challenge in terms of skills versus the job that you're performing at for the client, and the complexity mismatch to the skill and the background? And if at all yes, then what's your right configuration in terms of the success story that you want to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, obviously what you see is a huge shift on the discussion. So when we started in the beginning of the company, what was happening was more about educating the clients about the usage of AI and how that can change the way they're working. Right now, the discussion is about compliance, performance, and application, and making sure that whatever we provide can be extended on different use cases or can be like at the enterprise level. Yeah. So you can see the shift of discussion big time. Now, to do that, when you have a small model and you have a circle of people to talk about these kind of things, it's much easier. But how you're scaling the whole thing into something at the enterprise level, it's all about education of the people that are going to use the system. Especially it's about training the models or retraining the models, this is a huge education to understand how the models are interacting and can be performed better, and understand I would say the nature of the models.
Okay, Morgan, from your perspective.
Yeah, you've pretty much covered everything there, right? It's making sure you've got the right mix of people at the organization. As you say, not everyone's going to be a data scientist, not everyone's going to be aware of how different things, impact that output. So it's about being able to have that explainable element to make it understandable and a way that they can interact with it. Yeah. Two, it's around, as you say, the data, right? So it's ensuring that you have the right mix of subject matter experts on their side who can help cleanse that data, ensure that the data is accurate to where you need it to be. So when that input comes in from your technology team, that they can trust that has been done, cleansed, and is appropriate for use.
Makes sense. And I think that kind of brings us to the last topic, which I wanted to kind of touch upon, which is essentially around the platform, the kit, the actual tooling that you use to deploy these solutions, right? I mean, I'm thinking about it. Today, we've got microservices-based architecture, right? So you are no longer, obviously you've got monolithic applications, but there's a tremendous force in play in terms of moving to the cloud, building micro applications, today you are deploying as microservices, tomorrow you're going to go into serverless architecture, right? It's absolutely amazing. And I think it's moving in the right direction from an ecosystem perspective to really help modularizing data generation, help the supply chain of data, and therefore apply all the tooling that you need in terms of anomaly detection and reinforcement. I guess the bit which I see as still an opportunity is the ALM space, which is really the 9 yard of the platform play, where how you bring in, we talked about data intelligence practice and this practice owning, governing, qualifying, grading the data, but how does that become a part of the DNA so that any of the users at various levels have got the right level of authority, have access to the right data sets which are qualified and graded, and therefore what you produce in terms of a constructed solution as an intelligent agent is fairly trustworthy, right? So I think there's still this gap in terms of the ALM platform, and probably there is a need for what exists today to be tuned to bring in that collaboration in the context of what we are discussing here. Did you guys experience that gap, and are there any tactical solutions that you put in place to kind of bridge that for the time being?
So Cognitiv offers the solution in the cloud, private cloud, and on-premise. So that means at the client's servers. So obviously that is a very heavy topic, and it's very difficult to do that if you're a startup with defined resources. But now it's getting much easier because, as you said, with serverless, you can actually, rather than focus on the servers, you can focus on the applications and the database. So that means we can separate all the data from the clients. And you're going to say, actually, what's happening, you can have different databases for different clients and different servers at any time, and it costs nothing. So you can be much more compliant, you can be much more efficient, and with no addition of cost. So I think it's a real revolution, especially now with GDPR and other compliance measures that we need to comply, is a huge revolution when it comes to data management.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely. It's obviously, for the people that we're kind of dealing with, the financial services firms and that lot, there is still a certain reticence to adopting some of that. They are catching up. So I think, there is a bit of catch up to be done by certain parts of the organization. But it's there, it's ready to be offered. So.
Right. Okay, and here's the killer one then, right? And this is the one that we are going to end this with, okay? Now you guys, by virtue of how you have built, you perceived your solution, how you have built it, right? You're using a neural network, right? You are using big data, and this is a killer combination for something to be as opaque as it can get, right? You think about the big platform players and their hyper models. You can go a bit invasive, but beyond a point, it is still a black box as it stands today. And obviously, the big platform players are making progress towards making it glass box or at least gray. It's quite interesting to try and understand what do you think this journey is going to look like in the context of what we're discussing, right? It seems to be fairly complex, but I would like to hear this from you guys. What do you think?
I'll let you go first again.
So let's split it on. You talk about ethics. I'm going to talk about the more IT stuff. So as I said, neural networks have been designed specifically for better results, better accuracy. So nobody had, when they designed that, nobody had the idea of compliance and regulation and make sure why actually the robot decided this. And can you explain what was the decision making and the thinking? There was nothing about that. It was just about improving the accuracy. They have done a great job on this one. From machine learning at the 2008 technology to 2014, you can see a magnitude of the accuracy of change. So that was well done. 2018 now, everybody says, can you please explain why the neural network decided this? So now we can say, no, actually we cannot explain that because it has been exactly automated with for no reason to explain why. It's a very good answer, but we don't know why. But actually, you can improve that. You can ameliorate it in many ways. So a technology way, first of all, we cannot tell you why exactly or how. We can tell you why. So for instance, let's say we said a critical sentence has been decided that this is a critical document or that's the jurisdiction. So we can tell you which words the model used based on the decision. So, for instance, it's going to be the jurisdiction of United States. So you can see that's the decision on that. That's one thing you can do. You can know why. But also you can know, you can review the results. So when you review the results, you can also go back to the model and improve the results. Yeah. So there are many ways you can do that.
Yeah, again, echo that, but also, it's also when you're creating these models, being able to give the trust and confidence to the end user that you've followed best practice, that you've followed a code. We're not talking about going so far as regulation, but we're seeing it come out. Google recently, on the 7th, I think it was, released their code of AI. Accenture have released their 5 tenets of how to develop AI. You've got the Lord's House Select Committee. If you were listening to the talk earlier about the Magna Carta, there's 74 recommendations of how to create this. By having those clear codes of ethics that your team have been trained upon and instill within your organization, you can give that confidence that what you've been doing
I think we need to wrap this up, but I think as a conclusion, it's also design consideration. There are combinations of models that are out there. It's no longer today. It's a hybrid. You're saying supervised being combined with unsupervised and various sorts of traditional machine learning with neural networks, flag systems, the various architectures and design principles which are kind of kicking in just to kind of address that. Well, That really brings us to the end of this session. Well, Mark and Vasilis, as always, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
This was immensely helpful. I think in summary, obviously, we've got a way to go, but the technology is evolving, the thinking and the sponsorship is evolving in the right direction, and it's a matter of time till we have got all of our 9 yards guarded. I mean, it's going to be a challenging one for sure, but an interesting one. And we need to watch this out and keep evolving. But I think the key as well is to collaborate across organizations and at an industry level so that we can learn from each other and keep progressing at a pace that makes sense. On that note, thank you, everybody.